Hello, I'm Kindson the Tech Pro, bringing you free lessons on artificial intelligence and machine learning. Today's topic will be k-means clustering in machine learning. Now, this topic is found difficult by some students, but I'm going to tell you that it's not that difficult. So we are going to look at the steps, we are going to look at the formula briefly, we are going to look at the explanation of how it works, and then we take an example, and I'm sure by the time you finish this lesson you'll be very good in k-means clustering. One thing I want to tell you is that the textbook sometimes is very confusing, so you need to be careful which textbook you use. So let's look at the steps. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that the k in k-means clustering stands for the number of clusters. So k means the number of clusters, and mean means the means of the data points, the value of the data points in the clusters. So let's look at the steps of the algorithm. Of course, you know that the k-means clustering is an algorithm for clustering used to assign data points to different clusters in your sample space. So the first step in this algorithm says for each data point x in the input space of n, let's say x1, x2, x3 to xn, place this data point in a cluster whose current centroid it is nearest to. Okay, after all the points have been assigned, x1 to xn, adjust the location of the centroids of the k clusters. Of course, there might be a step 0 that says choose a number of clusters, so you have to choose a value for k. Sometimes k may be 3. If you want to create 2 clusters, you use k to be 3. If you want to create 3 clusters, you use k to be 4, and so on. So k can be 3 or 2 or any value you choose. So this is what you have to choose before you start. So then you now place the points in the cluster whose centroid it is nearest to. After all the points have been assigned, then you adjust the location of the centroid of the k clusters. The step 3 says you assign all the points to their closest centroids. Don't worry if you don't get it now, I'm going to explain it more, and it becomes clearer when we look at an example. Then repeat step 2 and 3 until convergence. Now, if you are taking a course on k-means clustering, try to memorize this formula. I'm not going to explain everything about it, but I'm just going to explain to you that this formula helps you to determine which cluster to assign the value of xn. So if you calculate j, you have this formula to calculate the value of j. So assuming you have rn1, it means that you assign the x1 to cluster k1. Okay, so mn means the mean of the centroid or the particular cluster. Alright, so here you see there are 2 loops. The first loops iterate through all your data points from 1 to n. Then the second loop iterates through the cluster from 1 to k. So if you find the cluster that is closest to that data point, you assign it there. Now, assignment of clusters. There is a topic in this textbook, but it's quite confusing, I must tell you. How do you assign clusters? For each data point xn, we use a corresponding set of binary variables we denote as r and k that tells us 0 or 1. If it's 1, it means that we are assigning k we are assigning xn to cluster k. If it's 0, we don't do that. So try to get yourself around all of this. I think it's clearer when we consider an example. Alright, so step 1, you have your sample space. Here we have k to be, I'm choosing a value for 2 of k. For k, now n is equal to 14. Try to count it, you see that it's 14. So how do we cluster it into 2 parts? The first thing is to select 2 clusters and put a centroid in each of the clusters. So in step 2, we have 2 centroids. Let me use a pen to annotate. Okay, I have this Centroid 1, I have this Centroid 2. So after drawing the centroid line, it means that some automatically are in this cluster and some are in this cluster. Now we are going to differentiate between the two centroids, and this we can do by coloration. So the cluster on the left, I color it red, having the centroid, the right centroid, the cluster on the left, I color it blue. Now the next step is to adjust the position of the centroid. Now if you look at this, you find out that it is not centralized. See, the data points are here, but it's here. So I think it will make sense to move it a little down to the center. We don't know exactly, but I'm just eyeballing to see that it's not in the center. And then this one, I move it a little to this way, because you see it tends to be outside, and that brings us to the third diagram. It tells us move the position of the centroid. So when I move the position of the centroid, what do you observe? You observe that some points now have joined a different cluster. So these two blue were in the blue cluster. Now after adjusting the centroid, they have to be here, so I have to accept it and simply color it to be red. So they are in the right centroid, as you can see in 7. Alright, so now I do think, looking at the fact that 2 more items have joined the right centroid, it means that the center is no longer feasible. So it means I think I need to move it a little bit upwards to be in the right center. The same thing for the blue. Now that these 2 are gone, I think I need to move it a little downwards, and that is exactly what I do. After this, I now draw a different line to separate the 2 centroids, and when I do that, I find out that 1 more item could now join the blue centroid, as you can see. So this is what you need to continue doing until there is no change. You can't until the centroids remain the same. So this is k-means clustering. Now you may be wanting to know of more explanation, maybe theoretical explanation, that I will also give you because I have done it. So I actually made up the write-up explaining it in clear terms in this place. I'll put a link. K means clustering, so you can see how it works, the steps, and so on. So this is what we've just discussed, so you can actually print it out and go through to see how it works. This is where we are going to stop. If this has been informative, you can subscribe so that you get more informative videos on AI and machine learning. I remain Kainton, the Tech Pro. If you have any questions, leave it there in the comment below, and I'm going to respond to all your questions.